How's it rockin', Dween Nation? This is the Dween Sports Podcast. We're about to get underway. But before we do, we'd love if you could like, comment, subscribe, or share. We are posting weekly sports content, and we want to build up the brand that is Dween Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy.
Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Pies, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and we are here for our last edition of our free agency predictions because free agency is only a handful of days away. We've already discussed quarterbacks and running backs and tight ends, so if you're curious to watch those episodes, just go and scroll down and you'll find those. But this one is wide receiver focused because there are a handful of them. A couple of top players that are in the free agency class or being traded that we're going to discuss. But we'll talk about a bunch of names, so I'm really excited to get to all of it. But before we do, how you doing, Genoa?
Yo, Dewey Nation. Justin, this is a really exciting episode because a lot of these players, where they could go, could help you win fantasy championships and even Super Bowls. A lot of these receivers could win you, championships by themselves, or it could help whatever quarterback that you end up drafting there. So this episode, really important. I think last year was kind of like the year of free agency running backs. This year is more of the free agency wide receivers, so I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, and let's really dive into it now. Before we get into predictions wise, because we had a couple predictions, but we've had the results and outcomes come out. So let's talk at the top. Deebo Samuel obviously was a big trade of this past week. We knew he was going to be on the move. They were already looking for a trade, and he lands with the Commanders. And to be honest with you, I think overall it's going to help the team more. I don't know how valuable he'll be in drafts, but what are your thoughts with Deebo and where he kind of lands next year in fantasy?
Yeah, Justin, I like Deebo Samuel as a really good 7th or 8th round pick there. I feel like with Deebo Samuel, there might be games where he doesn't get a lot of, volume, but then there'll be some games where he'll break out. A lot of people love Deebo Samuel's game that he had against Philadelphia a couple years ago. And I think that, he had like a big 40-point fantasy game. And I think that he can revitalize, games like that, win Washington in that system. You got Scary Terry there. You got Naomi Brown, excuse me. You got other players that you can, add to that system. And I think that he can be a good second string running back out the backfield with Brian Robinson if Eckler sticks around. And so I like Deebo Samuel. Now, this is not a guy I'm not starting the first 2 weeks of the season. I kind of want to see where it goes. But definitely a guy that could have good games, a good player to put in your lineup for bye weeks for sure, Justin.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it actually helps his value that Terry McLaurin's the main go-to wide receiver for the team, so he doesn't have to get those top corners and top, the top secondary of the team to guard him. So I think that helps Deebo. And I think at the end of the day, he will be a solid wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 for your team. But that's the Deebo news. Let's talk about the next guy that we had predicted, but the news from today has come out, and the Bengals are franchise tagging T. Higgins. I kind of expected this to happen. But if you're looking at the value of T. Higgins, I think it's still a very high because one, he's going into another contract year where the team can't franchise him next year. So they're either going for a long-term deal or, he's going to sign elsewhere. But we've seen T. Higgins with this Bengals team. They're an electric team. And when he's on the field, he is a top 12, top 15 wide receiver, at least in fantasy. And so I think that this is still a great move if you have him in your dynasty leagues or you're just curious at his value. This is great for him. He gets to stick with Jamar and Joe Burrow, so I love that there. What do you think, though, about T. Higgins and his value this year?
Oh, Justin, he's fantastic there. I just feel like I don't think he's all the way 100% happy about, what he's getting paid. I think he wanted a longer-term deal.
Right.
Tags are only a year kind of rental thing, and I think he wants something 3-4 years out there because he knows that, hey, this offense is somewhat special. They've been to a Super Bowl altogether. There's a chance that they could make another one with this team, if they can improve their defense and offensive line. I feel like there could be a chance, Justin, that he gets traded. Maybe he heads to San Francisco, or maybe he heads out to a Las Vegas, Chargers. I mean, something along the lines there. But hopefully he's able to stay there because, man, they're all so much fun to watch together.
Yeah, they really are the most fun offense, in my opinion, when you get all of them healthy and playing well. So, yeah, that's T. Higgins news. And then this is where we kind of, dive into the wide receiver free agency predictions because as of today, we have a new real number one free agent, in my opinion, at the wide receiver position, and that is Davante Adams. He was released from the Jets. And if you're curious where he might land, he has spoken outwardly about wanting to stay on the West Coast. So that lands him, to me, in my opinion, one of two locations. It's either the Rams or the Chargers. I don't think he'll return to the Raiders unless for some reason Aaron Rodgers goes there and then he wants to join him. But I don't think that's going to happen. So to me, it's Chargers or Rams. I would love, for his fantasy value, Rams is better in my opinion, but I would really like to see him in a Chargers uniform. That's kind of my stance on it. I think at the end of the day, he will go to the Chargers. But what do you think?
Justin, there's a lot of good spots I'd like to say Davante Adams go to. One of them is the Chargers because Justin Herbert, he needs him a number one guy. I mean, the best receiver he's really ever played with is Keenan Allen on the back half of his career, who was always hurt every other week, to go along with Mike Williams, who was a big play. But he, as well, Justin, is you've had him a lot in fantasy yourself, Justin. I know you're a big Mike Williams guy. He would do good for you, I remember, and then the next week he'd get hurt for you. It happened at least once a season for like 4 years straight. So that's one thing. LA with Herbert. He could go to San Francisco. There's a spot open there. Deebo's gone. If you guys watched our mock draft, our 2.0, we also talk about Matthew Golden get going there to San Francisco. So maybe if they don't go that way, if San Francisco doesn't draft a wide receiver, maybe Davante Adams can go there. He is a West Coast guy. You mentioned Vegas, very interesting because maybe he could have stayed Vegas all along and then Aaron Rodgers would have got released anyways. And it would have made such an easy decision for Tom Brady to be like, hey, Hall of Fame quarterback, come on. But Justin, there's just one destination that's not west, that's actually north, and a division where Davante Adams used to play. And I talked about this in a couple episodes ago. I want Aaron Rodgers to go to Minnesota, and I want Davante Adams to team up with Jay Jettas, please, for fantasy sakes. That would be so much fun to watch. You get Rodgers there. He might be, reunited with his old guy, Aaron Jones. You get Jefferson. You got Jordan Addison, who's a star. You got Hawkinson. Just go ahead and add Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers. Why not? You get to pick on your divisional rival twice a year. You give Detroit a challenge now because you have a good defense led by Mike Flores. You got Rodgers there. You can coach your young guy, McCarthy, a rookie who tore his ACL. I'm sorry. I'm going to wait another year on that. Why not have him coached by Aaron Rodgers himself? He's got 1 or 2 years left in this league. And Davante Adams has got 2 or 3 years left as a top receiver, and he's still got some juice to him. So I would like to see Minnesota, but obviously, Justin, he'd probably go out west.
Yeah, I mean, that would be super interesting. I mean, honestly, the whole Minnesota scenario would be just a crazy – I mean, they become the Minnesota Packers. That Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Davante Adams
with
is a
Jefferson, though, Justin. With Jefferson.
But then you get the best receiver in NFL. So that's a crazy prediction. But I would love to see it. So that is Davante Adams. Let's start I actually want to dive into a guy who isn't a free agent, but to me is the second highest now of skill, who has been floated around in trade talks, and that's DK Metcalf. Now he has been talked about. There's a trade that's been floated that him to Green Bay, and I think that is what's going to happen. It might happen on draft night. We might have to wait a little bit. But I really like DK as a Packer. I think that would be a game changer for Green Bay, for Jordan Love. They're missing that alpha wide receiver, and I really think it would elevate DK from a guy who's that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 in fantasy to an actual wide receiver 1. What do you think with DK?
I like it, Justin. I mean, I think he could be traded. There's another team. There's actually 3 other teams that actually intrigue me there for DK Metcalf. One is the Indianapolis Colts there. They got Alec Pierce, they got Pittman, but Justin, can you really drive the needle with them? Maybe you could if you can add a DK Metcalf into that receiving core. Maybe it can help AR develop. Maybe it can help his stats because Justin, his past couple games he started, maybe he didn't throw for too much, and that was kind of the concern. Another team is the Patriots, and I think this one makes the most sense. I'm looking at DK Metcalf's kind of best of 2024, and he did have one of his best games against New England there. I think it was like $120 and a touchdown, and I think that's some foreshadowing there. And I think Drake May needs a top guy, right? And Drake May, a great character guy, a guy like DK Metcalf has a strong character, and I think that him and Drake May can definitely coexist there. And Mike Vrabel can definitely make that work there. He had A.J. Brown, a former kind of Ole Miss guy, so I think that A.J. Brown did end up leaving Tennessee, but that had nothing to do with Vrabel. More kind of so where the offense was going with Tannehill at the time in that front office. But I think that, Vrabel can handle DK Metcalf, and I think that he'd work just fine in New England. They'd welcome him with open arms, and I'd like that. Lastly, I had another team, and that would be Pittsburgh. Now, I know there's another number 14 in Pittsburgh that does have some issues behavior-wise on the field, but I think it would be just so like Pittsburgh to just like have a nice guy Russell Wilson or a nice guy or Fields at quarterback, and then you have Pickens and DK Metcalf. I think that'd be so interesting. I know Mike Tomlin has not the best history with wide receivers. I mean, there's a laundry list of wide receivers that were good in Pittsburgh and just fell off. I mean, AB, Deontay Johnson, Pickens is heading that direction. I mean, if you guys want, remember Mike Wallace. Yeah, it's just there. I don't know, Martavis Bryant. I mean, there's guys that were good and they just didn't fall through. But DK Metcalf, I don't think wouldn't hurt, and he has played with Russell Wilson, so that's a plus as well.
No, I think that'd be a really good combo. Pickens on the outside as well as DK on the other side. And then the New England one, New England's got money. They got money, and you become the hands down number one wide receiver. I think there's some interesting landing spots. Now let's talk about three guys that are all in the twilight of their career, in my opinion. Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs, and Amari Cooper. All are free agents this time around. Obviously, the stories for them, Keenan Allen got traded last offseason, had a very solid season overall. Stephon Diggs was on his way to having a really good season, but did tear his ACL. And then Amari Cooper, who was coming off of a great year with, Joe Flacco in Cleveland, doesn't do very well, gets traded to a wide receiver needy team in Buffalo. I candidly had a lot of hopes that might become something where Josh Allen and Amari Cooper were going to connect. But Amari Cooper, it just seemed maybe he was washed. Maybe he just was too cold. I don't know what was going on. But Amari Cooper did not work out in Buffalo, and I don't think they bring him back. So I'm curious, what are your takes on where those three guys are going to land?
I think Amari Cooper could end up on teams that could really pay low for Amari Cooper. I'm looking at every team in the NFL. The one that kind of does make the most sense, I'm potentially thinking Denver for Amari Cooper. I'm also looking at I know he probably wouldn't return to the team that drafted him, to the Raiders. Maybe an Arizona can pay a little bit and get him. But I think that Denver needs some room for wide receivers, and I think that Amari Cooper could fit what they're looking for. You mentioned Keenan Allen. I'm looking at it as well. I would like Keenan Allen in Baltimore, right? Give Keenan Allen a little small deal in Baltimore. Pair him up with, Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and Andrews and all that. Also, I'd like Keenan Allen in Arizona. Well, I think maybe he'd be a good bargain in Arizona with Kyler. That's really the best I see. Maybe a Tennessee for Keenan Allen. I don't know if that's a stretch. And then lastly, let me see. You mentioned Stephon Diggs. I think this one's interesting. What if Stephon Diggs were to join his brother in Dallas there and go to Dallas on a cheap deal? Maybe he goes to a divisional rival there. Maybe he joins the Colts. Maybe he goes to Baltimore. It kind of reminds me of a couple years ago with my Texans. We had Justin Reed. He was on a good team, and then he went to an even better team and won a Super Bowl. So I kind of feel like that could be something that Diggs does, right? On the Texans, and then goes to a Baltimore, and they win the Super Bowl. Maybe, he goes to, I don't know, maybe some crazy reason he goes to Philly on a low deal. He could even go to Pittsburgh. So there's some moving parts here. I would like Diggs in Pittsburgh. I think him and Russell or him and Fields would be a pretty nice combo there. So that's what I'm thinking for those wideouts.
Yeah, I think some of those landing spots are really interesting. I'm a little bit more basic. Keenan Allen returning to Chicago. He did say in an interview last offseason that he's either retiring with the Chargers or the Bears. So I think he's either returning to Los Angeles or staying in Chicago. And I think to the fact that now I feel like Chicago's really going upwards, that he's going to stay there and take a cheap deal to help build Caleb Williams. Stephon Diggs, I feel like there's a good connection with him in Houston. I feel like he gets along with Nico Collins and CJ Stroud, and I think he might feel like there's some unfinished business, with how he started his season but then got injured. I could see the Dallas one that you mentioned, go play with his brother, and it's not that far from Houston. And then the last one, Amari Cooper, I actually have him returning to Dallas, a team he used to play for. I feel like we talked about in the mock draft, have CeeDee Lamb, have Amari Cooper, have Luther Burden or Matthew Golden. That would be a perfect thing to really revitalize this team for the Cowboys. So those were I had those three guys going as of these predictions. Let's keep it going. I'll grab three more names to help discuss here. Chris Godwin, who is coming off a tough ACL injury. Then you have a guy who's actually not a free agent yet, and Cooper Kupp. And then let's also talk about Hollywood Brown. So obviously these three guys at one point or another were highly regarded. But now I feel like there's some not as shininess on them for one reason or another. Either Cooper Kupp being a little older and not playing that well this season. Then you got Hollywood Brown, who I feel like he started the season hurt, and that really just led him to not having a good year. And I feel like just about everywhere he's been, there's high hopes, and it hasn't really hit those highs. And then, Chris Godwin, obviously, was starting out this season with was being phenomenal, then had the injury. But what do you have for those three guys and their landing spots?
Well, first things first, Justin. Chris Godwin, for me, is a lock to return to Tampa Bay. I just feel like, Baker Mayfield and that front office is going to push to get Chris Godwin back. That's Baker Mayfield's guy. You're invested in Baker. Last year, you signed Mike Evans, and I think this year you signed Godwin. You know that the future for these two wideouts, you don't have many, many more years, but you kind of want them to finish out. There were your two wideouts in your Super Bowl run there and those playoff years after with Tom Brady, and they did some damage this year, Justin. They were very impressive when they were healthy. Chris Godwin was having a great season until he tore his ACL. I mean, there may be a part of Tampa Bay that said, hey, this is your second ACL tear, and maybe this might not be the way to go going forward. But I think that he is a Tampa Bay favorite, so they keep him there. With Cooper Kupp, it gets very interesting because I think two teams that are going to overpay for them, and these are two teams that need wide receivers to pair along with their potential franchise quarterback. One is Carolina Panthers, right? They may go Tyler Warren in the draft at tight end, but then they might not be satisfied there. They think that they might have something with Leggett, but they want to add more. They need a veteran. Let's go ahead and get Cooper Kupp there. I know Thielen might be staying. I'm not sure if he is. So let's get Cooper Kupp there. And I think Cooper Kupp could be really good in Dave Canales' offense, really good with Bryce Young. That's one. But then he can also go to Las Vegas. Now, I think that if they were to go with Shador or they sign Sam Darnold, or even go Jalen Milroe, I think that Cooper Kupp would pair along just fine with those three quarterbacks. And Cooper Kupp and Brock Bowers, both healthy, would be a nasty combo there. And a Pete Carroll offense that was able to produce, Doug Baldwin, great couple seasons Doug Baldwin had, DK Metcalf. Even Tyler Lockett was phenomenal there under Pete Carroll. And I feel like they can make that work. So that's where I think Cooper Kupp, I think he goes with a low-end team. Remember, Cooper Kupp is already a Super Bowl MVP, Triple Crown. So maybe he wants to go to a team that may not be a contender all the way, but they're just maybe a piece or two. That's what I see with Cooper Kupp. And then Hollywood Brown, I just see Dan Campbell being like, you know what? I need me another receiver. I just need me another receiver. We're going to go defense in the draft. And I think that they bring Hollywood Brown there. And Hollywood Brown is prone to play with some good teams. He played with Baltimore in their playoff runs. I think he was there for Arizona's playoff run. They're one and only with Kyler. And I think that, Justin, he was with Kansas City. And so this is a guy that you can plug and play with any contending team and it would be just fine. I like Hollywood Brown to be the perfect complement to Monroe in Detroit.
I think that's super interesting, Hollywood there.
And Jameson, yeah.
The reason, so I have Hollywood going to the Bills only because obviously they need wide receiver for one, but two, there's been a rumor of it as well. I try to stay in the whispers. I feel like Lord Varys from Game of Thrones, always trying to hear the whispers and the rumors. Some most not true, but some could be true. And then once they hit, you're like, hey, I knew it. But anyway, I have Hollywood going to Buffalo. I think that he doesn't have high fantasy value anywhere he lands, in my opinion. But he's gonna get signed somewhere. As for Cooper Kupp, I have him getting traded to the Broncos for a late round pick. I feel like they need a wide receiver. They could get that. It gets Bo. I know that Cortland Sutton's a seasoned veteran, but Cooper Kupp is a Triple Crown winner, Super Bowl MVP. That they could get a guy with Bo Nix to really help that offense grow even more in 2025. And then Chris Godwin, I completely agree with everything you said. He is a Tampa Bay guy. He's a Tampa Bay guy through and through. We thought that last year that Mike Evans might leave, but hey, Mike Evans is a Tampa Bay guy. Same story here with Chris Godwin. They bring him back. But yeah, I mean, and there's like 6 or 7 more names, Dwayne Nation, that they're names that aren't super, relevant. I think Diami Brown is worth a shout out. Nick Westbrook-Akine had a handful of touchdowns. He's a free agent as well. DeAndre Hopkins and Josh Palmer. Genoa, do you have any thoughts on any of those guys? You don't have to discuss all of them, but those are some big names.
I would like to see Diami Brown return to Washington. I feel like he had a really good postseason there. He had a great ending to the season. I feel like he's a good complement to Terry McLaurin. He is really young. I think we all know him to be in Amon-Ra St. Brown's draft, a guy that he called out. So he's still fairly young there as a wide receiver, and you need that volume there because you just got Deebo, but how much is he going to play? He's been nicked and nacked, out of shape. So definitely that's a young guy that you can trust. Your now second-year quarterback, Jaden Daniels. You mentioned other ones like Hopkins could return. I think Hopkins is rather going back to KC, or maybe he can go to Baltimore. I think he can be a difference in Baltimore. And everyone else, Justin, I don't really think they could be really good, to be honest.
I think Nick Westbrook-Akine is kind of destined to go back to Tennessee, where he actually had some notable games. Obviously, scored 8 to 10 touchdowns on the season. Why not just go back to the team that you did good on? I don't think anybody's rolling out the red carpet to bring him in. And then who's that last guy I mentioned? Oh, Josh Palmer. A guy that's been on the Chargers for a while. I feel like he's had the opportunities to really take the step forward to be their top guy, but never really took it, or never really took advantage of it. I think he is actually going to be on his way out. I don't think he stays in Los Angeles. I have the Jets written down for him because they cut Davante Adams. They're telling Alan Lazard to seek a trade. Why not bring in a vet on a cheap deal with Josh Palmer? But yeah, I agree. They're nothing that's going to move the needle anywhere, but worth discussion. I feel like sometimes you see those names, you're like, oh, he's a free agent. Or like, when you're in April and you're like, oh, he signed there? Like, these are kind of those guys. Juju Schuster finds himself on this list. Darius Slayton. Deontay Johnson, I don't know if he'll ever sign with the team. Demarcus Robinson actually had a handful of good games. But Dwayne Nation, if you're curious on any more high-name free agents, or just anybody you're curious about, drop your comments below. These are our wide receiver predictions for free agency. We really appreciate you guys listening. Stay tuned because we got more mock draft stuff. And really, I think at this point, we're going to start diving into talking about these upcoming rookies, seeing what we think that their landing spots are, and if we grade them as first-round guys, second-round guys. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for listening. And Genoa, send us out.
Yo, Dwayne Nation, this was our wide receiver predictions. And hey, all these wide receivers, we should know where they're heading within the next week there. So you can come back in a week or so and see where we matched up there and see if we were right or wrong, or if we were close or just far away. So thank you guys for watching. We love you guys. And as always,
peace.